Hey, everybody, welcome back to Pro AV Today. I am your host, Ben Thomas. Fun conversation today, really centering around data storage. And, if you're part of the media, the entertainment, maybe the broadcast data center community, this is a conversation maybe that's been happening for a little bit longer than it has on the enterprise office and enterprise organization space. But I think that we have a good opportunity now, especially as folks, kind of come from that media and entertainment world and can help speak into the enterprise office space and the enterprise organization space. It's a conversation that needs to be had, especially as we're merging the IT and technology worlds and AV and storage, and everybody is kind of conglomerating these days. And wanted to bring on someone who I thought knows a lot more about I do than in this specific subject, but that's Mark Noland over at Kingston. Mark, thanks so much for coming on today.
Hey, good to be here.
Mark, I touched on it at the intro a little bit. I know that you and I kind of both have some experience coming out of the media and entertainment storage world, where things like archival procedures and storage workflows are the norm. But as you're seeing the post-pandemic world shift more towards video and long-term storage, it doesn't have to be video explicitly, but creating more content, creating more data-heavy and data-rich, tools. It's important to start having these conversations, right? And from your perspective, what are some of the things, especially coming out of the pandemic, that you're seeing, these new enterprise organizations start to demand in their storage?
Well, first of all, like when everything started and everybody was doing work from home, the workstations and like laptops and workstations and all that stuff like flew off the shelves, and because of inventory issues, was sort of back ordered for a long time, and now everybody's kind of got like a pretty kick-ass workstation at home if they're doing things that need that, or they've got like a Road Warrior laptop that can make them sort of independent and able to work from anywhere. Some of those might be getting up to 2 years old. So in some cases they'll probably need like an upgrade to RAM, or maybe storage, things like that coming up in the next year, 18 months. And if you look at processors from 2 years ago, they're still really, really fast relative, so it's like Kingston very, very much fits into that sort of like upgrading your existing systems. And like I do see we're sort of moved into the SSD only world, but there's still a lot of room for hard drives for cold storage and archives and stuff like that. But there's a lot of people that may even still have some spinning disks in some systems that they, fortunately we provide a lot of SSDs to replace those things with.
Mark, kind of sticking on that same topic of conversation, I feel like when the pandemic hit, people were forced to have a staged approach in their technology, right? You talked about maybe having one of those workhorse laptops, or just grabbing something that you could find and then figuring out how to fit it into your existing workflows. And now we're at a point where we're having to have conversations a little bit more about retooling those devices and making accessible network infrastructure for those hybrid workers and things like that. And when you look at, I would say, the IT department as a whole in an organization, really, it kind of boils down to two responsibilities, right? Device management and network and infrastructure security and management, obviously. And those two worlds collide when it comes to storage, because not only are you talking about having to worry about device storage, right? Whether it's speeds, RAM upgrades, long-term storage, things like that, but you're having to have conversations about shared storage, right? So things like VPN access. And, talk to me a little bit about how kind of the hybrid workforce as a whole has changed a lot of that infrastructure.
Well, I think one of the things that really got nailed down that has less to do with us and storage is just the remote access and using technologies like Teradici technology that's, I believe, owned by HP now. There's other remote technologies that get you lower latency and higher bandwidth, and they're focusing on only moving the pixels on the screen that are moving at the time, things like that, but also getting better pixels, like better color depth and things like that, because if you're doing media and entertainment workflows, like if you're talking about like editing, you can work on a remote system pretty easily because you're just, you're needing to, you remote into, you've got like a local machine, you remote into like an editorial system, and you're just sort of moving proxies on the timeline. And you could even have local proxies on your machine, but you're, talking to, you're referencing full res material that could be online at, either at a data center or at your facility. There's a lot of different approaches to this, but like I think that over the last 2 years, people have had to like work out all the kinks in this, and spend a lot of time ironing it out, and now we're getting down to where like I don't know if you were at IBC, but Frame.io in the Adobe booth was like everything, and much to my chagrin, they were saying, nobody will need storage, in 5 years. And I was like, I don't know if it'll be 5 years. And
it just depends on where we're storing it, not
exactly.
whether it's stored.
Exactly. It's like the cloud is somebody else's computer. So if you want to relinquish that control, like go ahead. But it was really cool seeing like the camera to cloud workflows. They were doing things where they had a camera that was connected up and recording the audience live, and then feeding all that data back to a data center, and then they had editors in the venue as well that were having the content pop up on their screen as soon as it was there. One of the things that this requires really though is like much, if you're doing this off of hard drives, the latency and the bandwidth would be so constrained that you wouldn't see it for a long time. And in this world, like a lot of our data center drives, they have very low latency, and when you have a large RAID of them, latency is additive. So if my latency is like a millisecond on one drive, and I have a RAID of 16 or 32 drives, now it's 16 or 32 milliseconds minimum, right? So if you're talking like microseconds because you have something in memory, you have a lot of memory, that's a lot more tolerable. Like if people that are going on online purchasing, and they fill their shopping basket, and when they go to buy it, if they have to wait for more than half a second, sometimes they'll back out of it like, hey, what's going on here? And so like milliseconds make a big difference. And so latency being additive, and that pushes you towards going with higher bandwidth, next generation NVMe drives, things like that where whether it's your local storage or cloud.
Mark, you bring up a really, really interesting point, and kind of tagging on to the first half of the question that I asked a minute ago. What are the concerns that IT managers, IT departments of these newer verticals and newer enterprise organizations, what are some of the challenges that they should be thinking through in advance? Obviously cloud storage comes up as a potential solution. Off-prem storage, we could have that conversation all day. Look, eventually that data is stored somewhere, right? Whether it's a data center, whether it's on-prem, whatever, it's stored somewhere. So it's a little bit of a, pardon my French, it's a little bit of a bass backwards conversation because it's getting stored somewhere eventually. But what changes is the infrastructure, right? Whether it's access protocols, shared storage, things like that. Talk about how the off-prem storage in the cloud storage, is impacting a lot of these enterprise organizations, especially with their remote workforces.
Well, it's sort of outside of my purview, but there are a lot of solutions that for faster networking, because it still comes down to latency, right? So if you've got somebody doing editing, or you've got even if you've just got somebody doing database entry remotely, there's too much latency if they're working on a remote machine, or they're working on a database that they're working locally, but the database is remote. When there's too much latency, and you see, I entered some data, I clicked enter, and my local machine didn't do anything yet. Maybe I didn't press the enter key, so you do it again, and then all of a sudden you've got you've pressed the enter key twice, and maybe it tabbed into a different thing. So it's like whether you're working remotely with your on-prem or cloud, it's latency, and bandwidth is sort of part of that, but like the cool thing is the lower the latency device is, the more bandwidth you got by default. Like you can get a lot of bandwidth out of hard drives, but as you add more hard drives to get the more bandwidth, you're adding latency. And so like when like if you've got 16 hard drives, spinning disks, and you click play, it might pause a lot longer than we got everybody trained to where they click something and they want to see it moving now, right? So there's still a ton of hard drives out there, but hopefully they're all cold archive stuff now. The hard drives are all used for storing the stuff that's going to go to tape, that's going to go to the salt mine somewhere. Like SATA SSDs are your cold tier, that's like, or the cool tier, and then your NVMe and DRAM are your hot tier, like providing access to everything that you want now. And that can be locally on your laptop, your workstation, or a remote workstation, or a server. It's all sort of true. I used to do a lot of work with game studios, movie studios, architectural and engineering studios, and in order to like sort of diagnose what some of their problems were, we'd start at the workstation, whether it's data entry, CAD CAM, 3D animation. You start at the workstation, you figure out, what bottlenecks need to be broken there, whether it's DRAM or local storage. And then the next thing is back to the server. So usually you need a faster network connection. And then once we get the faster network connection back to the switch and get all the problems with the switch worked out, then you end up needing faster storage and more memory potentially on the server to make everything, faster, through make that whole pipeline one thing.
Well, Mark, I love really that you focus so heavily on latency, right? Obviously, in the media and production world, latency really is everything, right? You're worried about timing, you're worried about keyframes, things like that, and I think the media and entertainment world really has a pretty good understanding of the importance of that. But if I'm Mike or Stacy who's working remotely, I might not know that my laptop, even though I've got all the best infrastructure back at the office, I've got the best connections, even I've got the best Wi-Fi or Ethernet connection as well, but my device may actually be the one hindering the speed and performance. Talk about from an IT perspective, because a lot of times, especially in enterprise situations, the IT manager who typically is in charge of all the devices is also in charge of upgrading those devices. How can we proactively, as the IT community, dive in and kind of prescribe some of those device upgrades proactively?
Sometimes this isn't true everywhere, but sometimes I'll run into the thing where if you've got like somebody that's a professional sysadmin and they kind of have like a ninja system that is their own system, they'll look at somebody that's like either an artist or data entry or something, and they'll be like, you don't need this. And it's like, well, like they'll be like, I don't get like a high-end GPU. You don't need a high-end GPU. It's like, well, you know what? You got to get over yourself. And, sometimes as a manager, I would have to hire people that I'm paying way more than I get paid, because they're going to do a specific job that merits that. Right. And the same is true. It's like there are certain positions that need a couple of GPUs, and that might cost as much or more than a computer. Not everybody needs that. Some people can use fractional GPUs, and if you're doing a data center, the cool thing is if you're making virtual machines, you can cut out a machine that has so many CPU cores and so many GPUs. So you could give somebody 4 GPUs for the week that they need it to do 3D review, but then put them back into the pool and divvy them up, one or even a fractional. Like if somebody's doing email and running Microsoft Office, they could have a fraction of a GPU just because they just need to run a screen and have a virtual machine online. But when you need the resources, the bandwidth of and the memory, it's good to reevaluate, and it's also good to look at what the requirements are, because Sometimes people get in their minds, like a workflow, from 5 years ago. This is what we do. This is how we do it. Applications, as they get developed farther, they get more and more greedy. It used to be 4 gigs of memory. Well, it used to be 4 megs of memory, right? But it's like 4 gigs of memory, then 8 gigs of memory, then 16, then 32, and I think 64 is the new. If you're doing something, like if you have a laptop, and you're a power user, 64 gigs of memory is actually pretty. It's a pretty good number to have, right? Somebody might look at that as way too much because they're looking at it from years ago. But if you're using multiple applications at the same time, if you're going back between like After Effects and Premiere and Photoshop, you can suck up all that memory, pretty quick.
Well, Mark, that's incredible insight. And I know our listeners, both in the AV and IT communities, are going to take a lot away. But I'd be remiss if I didn't at least ask about one of my favorite events every year, and that's CES. I call it the Great Reset every single year because I feel like there's always something that I see that completely just flips every expectation that I have of modern technology. And I'm sure this year was no exception. Didn't have a chance actually to get out there. This year was a little bit bummed, but tell me about some of the things that Kingston brought out to the show and some of the things that you're optimistic about going into 23.
Well, we've got like some cool new consumer drives, like our NV2 drive. We've come out with a 4 terabyte version of that. That's our entry level consumer drive. So, previously it was like, I think up to 2 terabytes. And, now we have a 4 terabyte version of that. So that's pretty great. I'm building a demo of using 2 of those. So I've got like 8 terabytes of storage on a Intel NUC as a Plex server. And that is, able to stream 4K. And then we've got, also in that Intel NUC, Kingston, previously had a gaming brand that we sold off to HP as a HyperX brand, but we retained the SSD and DRAM business, and that's rebranded as Fury. And so we have, we're showing off our Fury DRAM and like our new speeds that are involved, 6,000 mega transfers. So brutally fast, both SODIMMs and DIMMs for gaming systems. And then the Fury Renegade SSD as well, which is a pretty nice Gen 4 gaming SSD that's actually very practical for workstations as well.
Well, Mark, we barely even scratched the surface of gaming. I feel like we could take this conversation probably for another 2 hours, but we'll save it for another day. Have you back on. Mark Noland of Kingston. Mark, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
And thank you for tuning in. Be sure to join us next time.